I had this idea that really persisted that I thought it would be a lot of fun to have a character who was a superhero but a super slacker about it. She was kind of an unwilling superhero, and part of it was because bad luck dogged her everywhere, because if you get really big as your superpower, what you're going to do is really big property damage.
Picture this, a 250-foot tall superheroine in a bright red coat and thigh-high boots, standing over a city she just accidentally half destroyed while trying to save it. Meet Ronnie, Kane, the reluctant hero at the center of Giant Girl Adventures, a webcomic that's been quietly revolutionizing how we think about power, identity, and what it really means to wear a mask. But here's the thing that gets me. The creators behind Ronnie's story, Sabrina Pandora from Texas and D. Fish from rural Pennsylvania, know a thing or two about secret identities themselves. As Sabrina puts it in our conversation, I literally had a secret identity during her transition, navigating the same double life that's been the backbone of superhero stories for decades. The parallel isn't lost on either of them. What started as a Star Trek fan fiction friendship evolved into something much more powerful during the pandemic. A creative partnership that's produced some of the most authentic representation in indie comics today. But this isn't just a story about making art. It's about making art now, in 2025. When Sabrina is watching a Texas legislature that could make her existence a felony, and Dee is checking which states are safe enough to attend comic conventions. Their response? As Sabrina tells me, persist as I do, and push back the darkness by making art. 13 years into Giant Girl Adventures, these two trans creators are doing something that feels both timeless and urgently necessary, proving that the best superhero stories have always been about the people society tells can't be heroes. Their message is beautifully simple. We exist. You're not alone. And in a world trying to erase that existence, that might be the most heroic act of all. This is Art in the Raw. All right, Sabrina Pandora, D. Fish, welcome to Art in the Raw. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Looking forward to the conversation. Sabrina, you've mentioned being a lifelong comics collector, and you always dreamed of creating comics. Can you share with us kind of the moment when your hobby of collecting comics transformed into a desire to create them?
I had a very close friend and his best friend who created some comics to submit to Dragon Magazine to try to get a gig doing comics there, which was a big gaming magazine of the 80s. And watching them produce comics showed me that it was just a craft. It could be done. And that's what inspired me to start making my own. I put it off for a lot of years, but I got back around to it again.
Nice. How did that eventually manifest as Giant Girl Adventures?
I had this idea that really persisted that I thought it would be a lot of fun to have a character who was a superhero but a super slacker about it. She was kind of an unwilling superhero, and part of it was because bad luck dogged her everywhere, because if you get really big as your superpower, what you're going to do is really big property damage. Yeah. So she was perennially dogged by the troubles that she left in her wake. And that was what got me started telling Giant Girl Adventures.
Dee, what about you? You had a webcomic called Finding Dee. Is that still something that you're working on?
Yep. I've been working on that since 2017. It's a weekly webcomic. I've been working on that for years, still going with it. And we got, the 7th black and white collection will be sixth black and white collection will be coming out soon, and the 3rd color collection is in process now.
Nice.
And yeah, it's one of many comics I've worked on.
Sounds like it. I know that comic kind of chronicled your coming out as trans in your 40s. How was there a turning point when you decided to share that journey through your art? And how did it inform your approach to maybe doing Giant Girl?
The moment for me, it was I'd already come out. I've been working on another strip before that for years called Dandy and Company. It's the first comic I ever created. I've been drawing it for years, and I was always a character in the strip. I was the cartoonist, so I
Mm-hmm.
came out in the strip, and it was the better part of a year of people saying, "Oh, you really should do a comic about coming out. You should do a comic about being trans. You should do a comic about this." And about it, literally on the 1 year anniversary of my coming out, I'm like, fine, I will bleeping do a comic about this. And I started doing these kind of, originally they were like written like blogs, and I would start doing them as comic strips so I could put like punchlines on the otherwise stressful situations. And people just kind of responded to it. And in very short order, it became less about being my life as a transgender woman and more of a, my life is just my life and it's pretty normal for all by all respects. And that became the crux of the strip, is kind of pointing out that there's no real weird mystique going on here. It's the same boring crap everyone else deals with in their lives.
Exactly.
Pets and, you know,
LGBTQ people are just people.
everybody.
We all have the
But
same.
I would posit that your strip is also much more fantastic because it's your life, but you're very imaginative.
Yeah,
And so
it's
you often
magnified.
breathe a lot more color and you show your fandoms and the things that you love are often paid homage to within the strip. So you are giving the reader a much more in-depth look at who you are than just your boring, average, everyday life.
This is true.
So this is for both of you. So either one of you, feel free. The character of Ronnie Kane is a very kind of bold identity. The red coat, the thigh high boots, the internal struggle with what heroism really means. What personal experiences or influences helped shape Ronnie, and how's your connection to her changed over time?
Well, Dee picked this one up as of this book, and this was the sixth volume. As far as experiences that shaped her, I always imagined if you got superpowers, what would it really be like? And I loved the concept that really, if you did empower yourself, it would just produce nothing but trouble. And I thought that would be a fun story to tell while I wove a larger story around it. And for this one, I wanted to do a big fantasy epic, so that's paying homage to the tabletop games of my youth, playing D&D when I was a kid. Now, as for what drives the artistic look of it,
Artistically speaking, I draw a lot of inspiration. I mean, there's a lot of comic book artists I reference or will kind of call back to. Arthur Adams, for storytelling, a lot of John Romita Jr., who, for my money, is probably the best at drawing things that just look way bigger than they possibly could on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Scale and scope is definitely a big deal to me. Gareth Edwards, the 2014 Godzilla, I reference that a lot in the way they frame the shots to make Godzilla look really big. More than anything, more than that, it's, to me, it's always going to be about the characters. It's always going to be about making sure that no matter how superficial Ronnie might be acting in any given scene, I want to make sure that I'm drawing what's going on in her head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something Sabrina and I talk about a lot is the, you know, she's not an idiot as a character. Sometimes she'll act like it, but she's got a lot going on in there, and I'm all about the silent acting, about the body language, about the expressions, so that it really conveys, the, like you said, she's a very, very big character, metaphorically and literally. She wears, the thigh high boots, and the everything is in red all the time. And there's very much
there's nothing about it that screams, "Look at me!"
and if for people who are screaming, look at me, to me, there's always something going on under the surface worth exploring. And
Mm-hmm.
artistically, I dig into that stuff. I love thinking about that and putting that into the artwork and presenting that characterization as best as I can.
How much of each of you do you think is in the character of Ronnie, Sabrina?
There's a fair amount of me in there, but I would dare say that Ronnie is much more optimistic. God knows she's braver, but her slacker tendencies, those come from me.
Gotcha. And Dee, is there any of you in Ronnie?
Artistically speaking, if I'm drawing a character, I'm putting a little bit of something of myself in there.
Mm-hmm.
The indecisiveness or the
We have photographic evidence of her hunkering down to get a pose, to get a photo of it so that she can reference it to go, what does it look like when you're doing that?
yeah. Um, I mean, I'd
So
say that
there's that. It's her in there.
there's probably more of you in Ronnie once I took over on this book than there was before because we meet like this on screen all the time. So there are visual mannerisms that I will put in there that
I definitely see a resemblance, I think. um, Sabrina, you said before that you built, quote, an entire mythos for readers to explore.
Absolutely.
Take us back to that moment when Giant Girl appeared in your imagination. Was there a moment there where you realized just how expansive it could become?
Yeah, not early on, no. Initially, it was just kind of a gag. Um, and because I came up with her, I came up with how she came to be, her mother and her grandfather, and I came up with her arch enemy,
Mm-hmm.
which is Badonkosaurus, which is far and away, she's a far more popular character than Giant Girl is in her own strip, which is somehow fitting. But Badonkosaurus is the big 250-foot tall kaiju queen. The two of them are bound to be enemies. When I came up with that was where I realized that maybe telling a giant superheroine story might have a little more meat and potatoes to it. And so I started putting it together. Eventually, I pulled all of the threads that I'd put out there together and started forming them into a large overall plot, which who knows if I'll ever get to it. The joy of being a comics writer is I can write years in advance. I'm ready to go, but until I can pay an artist to sit down and spend the time to draw all of that out, yeah. It can be as written as you want, but it's
Yeah. So I want to pose this question to each of you, and I'll start first with Dee. A lot of artists have like a single early influence that kind of cracks everything open for them. Can you share with us kind of a comic or a book or a piece of art, something that fundamentally changed for you how you see storytelling?
this is a tricky one because there is no one thing. There isn't any one thing. There's a combination of elements that all kind of conspired to get me into the whole mindset of being on the path I am now in like there were cartoons like I would watch Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny, and every time I'd see the name Chuck Jones come up, the storytelling was tighter. The characters had more personality and expressiveness. I would be reading Spider-Man at the time, back when, we're early 80s. So you had Amazing and Spectacular. And Spectacular was fine. It was a Spider-Man comic and whatever. I don't remember to this day who drew it. But over on Amazing Spider-Man is when John Romita Jr. had first gotten started, and that to me looked like Spider-Man, and the storytelling popped, and the poses were more exciting. And again, I'd start noticing when one artist would move on to a different title, I'd see that name pop up, and all of a sudden that book looked a certain way, and I'm like, wait a minute, people make comics. I'm a people.
You can do
And
this too.
yeah, so there was a lot of that early storytelling. Star Wars, when Walter Simonson got onto that, I was just like, what? How is this looking so cool?
Mm.
these
So yeah, it was
layouts,
early
they
on with
encompass
art.
so much, and yet
So yeah, there wasn't any one thing I can think of because if there was, it happened so young that I don't have a distinct memory of it because I
Gotcha. Yeah.
really don't have any memory of a moment where I wasn't invested on this path. Like, people are always like, "Oh, when did you know you wanted to start drawing?" I'm like, "As soon as I stopped eating the crayons."
Have you? I guess you have stopped eating the crayons. Sabrina,
I
are you
recently
still eating
followed that
crayons?
broke up since about Tuesday.
No, 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 just candy cigarettes.
What's the answer for you, Sabrina? What fundamentally was there a comic or a book or something that changed how you see storytelling or influenced your storytelling?
I would say the most influential comic for me was probably Black Kiss, which was Howard Chaykin's hard-boiled adventure with that hint of trans femme porn in it. And yeah, that one was revelatory for me on a number of levels. If nothing else, in Chaykin's work, there's nobody to root for. There is no good guy, there is no bad guy. It's just people, and most of them are kind of crappy. But as I'd been raised on superheroic comics, where it's how does it go? Liberal ends achieved through fascist means. Yeah, I had come up on superheroics like that, and seeing that comics could tell entirely different style stories than what had been coming from the major publishers was revelatory to me, and I realized you can do anything you want with this medium. You can tell any kind of story that you want to tell. That along with mm, trans. Yeah, yeah. It'd still take me a few more years to figure it out, but that was definitely that first big crack in the egg.
I can add actually for that specific description, it would be Why I Hate Saturn by Kyle Baker for me. That's what broke me out of the mold of what superhero comics. That's the only thing. That was all I knew of comics other than like Archie. It was Batman and Spider-Man and all that. And when I came across Why I Hate Saturn by Kyle Baker, it did the same thing you're describing from that, where I'm like, wow, it can be about literally anything.
And he's such a master of expression too. The little background characters will be doing will like have their arms up and be deeply expressive, and it's just a little background character, but it's carrying the narrative so strongly with those 5 lines that character's made of. Sorry.
I always thought that there's something about comic characters, especially superheroes, who always seem to have a secret identity that resonates so deeply with the LGBTQ youth more than it does maybe outside of that group, because we as a group also have to learn to have a secret identity. And I think some of us maybe identify that before we realize why we identify. Do you have thoughts on that?
I'd say that's to some degree that is a universal experience for anybody who has something that they grow up with feeling the need to keep it a secret.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, across the board, if you're growing up LGBTQ, before a certain period in time, most specifically, yeah, we're all learning to come to grips with it. We're either denying it for years or decades. We're putting it in a box. We're putting it in a closet. We're saying, no, anything but this, making who we are the mask.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, for some of us, we have that I am Iron Man moment where we would just say, F you to the world and take that mask off. Which is not to say we all still don't have masks that we put on for all kinds of different things. But yeah, I mean, that aspect of it is definitely, I'm sure there's an appeal in that degree.
I can add that when I was figuring out those steps of I never thought it was possible. Hey, maybe it is possible. Hey, I could like live my life like this. Am I really going to do this? That's a big step in that process. So while I was going from being a transvestite to a crossdresser, and that space between crossdresser and trans, through all of that, I was going out to clubs. I was figuring out how to get dressed up. I was going shopping for a wardrobe. I literally had a secret identity,
Mm-hmm.
and I could make wisecracks about it to people. it was funny to me, ha ha ha, because I knew my secret identity. And I literally went through a period of about 2 years, I think, where I had a secret identity. Being a lifelong comics fan, and then coming back and ending up with a secret identity. And of course, there was my plain average everyday exterior, and then there was this fabulous flashy version. I mean, it really paralleled quite well, and it was a hoot.
On that, you got me thinking about that though. Now we're LGBTQ youth is much less inclined to ever even step into that closet. We're also seeing a mirror in the comic book industry that only a handful of these legacy characters still even have secret identities. Usually the ones that are connected so strongly with the IP that, the companies will throw their identity out there and then put it back in the box every couple of years.
Yeah, make a
But
good storyline.
a lot of these characters, Tony Stark hasn't had one for years. Captain America hasn't had one in a really long time because it didn't serve the narrative anymore. And yeah, they'll all throw them out there eventually, and they put them back in there. But I always feel like that's more to protect the IP than it is storytelling when they
Maybe,
put it back in the box.
maybe.
Because yeah, like the newer characters, that's less of a factor, and I think that
Trope.
might have to do with the appeal to the audience for whom hiding isn't as important a priority as being who they know they are. I don't know, just came to
Yeah,
mind.
that's pretty insightful. I hadn't noticed the change in the trend in that, but you might be onto something. So so let's
Although they might be going back underground, given how oppressive the current regime is, let's not forget. All of a sudden, if the school is calling your parents and going, little Johnny's acting a little queer. Sorry, it's state law. We got to call you.
let's talk a little bit about kind of artistic process evolution. Dee joined in Giant Girl in, I think it was 2020, 8 years, I think, into the comics run. Can you walk us through how that collaboration began and what surprised you about working together? Dee?
So our collaboration actually began not on the comic, but on, of all things, a Star Trek fan writing sim. We were already friends, but we're also diehard lifelong Trekkies. One of two badges that I have in reach right now.
Sabrina's got her badges in reach too.
And we worked together on that.
We're both geeky,
Yeah,
which is what we're illustrating, and that's a big chunk of how we managed to get together
but it's
as
also
a
where
creative
we
team.
learned that we had a decent rapport when it came to collaborating. And then it was during COVID, and I was wrapping up on one project that really kind of wasn't going anywhere. It was taking up a lot of my time, and I'm like, I'm kind of done with this. And definitely, it was during COVID. I had a zillion projects on my plate, and was like, I did a random pinup just for fun. I'm like, and we started talking back and forth and decided to kind of jump into it. It's been that kind of roller coaster ever since.
So what happened was we worked it out to where she was picking up the story already in progress, and that was a very interesting way to go about it, because the first few pages of that are a transition, because she went from trying to make it not too jarring from the last style to, by about the fourth or fifth page in, she was like, this is the style that I'm going to do this book in. And it just went from there. And it was entertaining because when we got to the end of the book, we had to double back and redo the beginning of the book so that all the art would be consistent, which inevitably made the book longer. But we work pretty closely together. The process is she'll knock out a rough, which sometimes is just scribbled ballpoint pen on a little notebook page, because she's like, a page will look something like this, and her roughs are strong enough, even as small as that. She might have one here. her roughs are strong enough that I can look at it, and if I have anything to add or not, I can go, oh, I wanted this panel a little bigger, shift this around like this, but otherwise, oh, and I need to, you've got the perspective going this way, I need the perspective going that way. I can just throw that out. She'll go and rough that out in blue lines, which is the equivalent of blue pencils. Rough, it's going to look, here's where the figures are, here's the motion that they're in. It's not a fine detail, but it's enough detail, again, so that I can see everything that's going on. So if I have anything to say, this is where I say it. Otherwise, ding, we move on to red lines. She tightens up those blue lines and then gives them detail. It's not inked level of strengthening, but it's giving her a much stronger idea of exactly what she's going to be drawing.
Yeah, it's breakdowns to the level that, like, say, a 70s or 80s inker could ink from it.
Okay.
But a modern inker would go.
And so then from there, she's off to ink, where these days she does the lion's share of the work in the inking, because she'll give me 2 or 3 lines to indicate what's going to happen, and I go, oh yeah, cool. And again, if I have any input, all of the stages along the way, I get an opportunity for input. Very rarely do we get late in the process where I'm going, maybe we could change this. And we worked out as a creative partnership a long time ago. Hey, could we do this? We could, but it would be a huge pain in the ass and a big time sink. And I would prefer not. That's a fair answer. Okay, let's keep moving. There you go. Is it super important? It is not,
Every now and again, we'll be like, and I'll be like, well, it'll be a huge time sink and a big pain in the ass. But dang it, it's good. It's really good. It's better than what we've got. And I will throw that day at it and go, okay, we're redoing this section of the page. Very rarely, though, have we ever done that when it actually got to inks. I think we maybe done it once or twice tops.
And I think really the key is we respect each other, and we respect each other's opinions and time, because we're both making sacrifices to bring this to life.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I ask something and I'm insistent on it, it's always because I feel that it's for the betterment of the work. And if she agrees, then that's what we do. And if she doesn't agree, then that's not what we do.
How would you say your storytelling has evolved from before Dee got involved to now that Dee is involved? Has it changed? Has the storytelling changed with her involvement?
Oh, very much so. I break up my dialogue a lot more. When you know the artist that you're working with and you know what they're capable of, you can write to it, and you can even write to it in like a shorthand. Because as long as you give them what's going on in as the subtext of the scene, as long as they understand that as a storyteller, they can bring the whole thing to life, and your dialogue doesn't have to carry it all. And by the same token, it'll often happen that when she's got the page illustrated, I'll rewrite or redistribute dialogue, because when I see how it's visually playing out, I go, okay, I need to change this because the visual narrative is pulling us this way. I need to respect that flow and work with it, which is, it's exciting. It's a lot of fun, but it involves being involved in the process. But at the same time, as a writer, once it's written, I'm done. So at least I get input into the artistic element here, where if oftentimes she'll say, oh, I'm gonna insert a panel here because we need an emotional pause. We need for that to register. And here, take it.
I warned every writer I've ever worked with about that. I'm like, just so you know, I will recommend adding panels to some of these pages where needed, where there'll just be, here's something that, you may have written 3 or 4 panels, and I'm like, oh, this needs 5 panels, or this needs 6 panels because you've got a great emotional beat here, but there's no room for it in there. Like, I'm one of those people, if there's 2 word balloons in a panel and they're expressing separate emotions, that should be 2 panels.
Right.
And I did adapt that from her.
So remind us again how long Giant Girl has been in existence?
Since 2012.
Since 2012. So that's a good
I
almost,
started writing her in 2011, but she got on the internet in 2012.
yeah. When a story goes on for that length of time, sometimes I think there can be a tension between keeping it consistent and growing the character. How do you stay true to Giant Girl's identity while pushing yourselves creatively with her?
That's easy. The book that we worked on together is the culmination of all of her character development. So it's designed to be one book that you can just read. You don't have to read everything that came before to be familiar to enjoy this story. You can go back and read that stuff if you want, but this is a self-contained story, and it's because this is where she finally turns the corner on being a slacker superheroine and actually embraces her heroism. So it being transformative in that way, that made it very creative for both of us, I feel.
Yeah, I don't really have any extra much to add to that because,
Ditto.
yep.
So let's move on to talk a little bit about kind of challenges and risks. Sabrina, you've talked about self-publishing as a way to avoid traditional rejection. I think you and I have had conversations about this before. Was there a moment of doubt or a setback where you questioned the future of Giant Girl, and where it would go, and how did you push through that?
I did. I did. The artist that I did the initial 16 issues with, Koen Leuten, who is an incredibly imaginative artist from Belgium, we had a falling out, and I didn't have an artist for the series. I inquired to a few artists to see if I could find somebody that I felt would be a good fit, but it just wasn't really coming together. I just kept paying for the web space every year and kind of drumming my hand while I said, well, maybe if I can save up a couple of bucks, I can hire somebody decent. But it just never really materialized. And then I met D, and I didn't. When I met D, I didn't anticipate that's where this was going to go either. But that was what when she said that she was willing to work on Giant Girl Adventures was when I knew that the project was revitalized, and that was after a hiatus of about 4 years. So I kept the lights on, so I had that much faith in it, but I didn't. But nothing was happening.
So this question is kind of for both of you, and I believe you mentioned a little earlier in the interview that you draw a little bit from your lived experience as trans creators for your characters. Has there been a storyline or a character that you've written about or drawn that felt especially vulnerable to share? And how did your readers respond?
A lot of Finding D, especially in the early days, was really raw.
Mm.
When it was very much about these experiences, especially when I would be, I don't ever put real people in there in a negative sense. I'll always throw in a placeholder, a fake kind of thing. But every now and again, people will be like, that was about so and so, wasn't it? I'm like, yeah. I've had people I would live in Florida for years, and I had people in that community, where I find out from other friends that like the entire topic of a dinner one night after a convention was about how I was doing all of this just to get attention. And it's this big, huge marketing scale. Like, yeah, and I put that in a strip where I'm like, yes, because I did all of this for a non existent interview on Bleeding Cool.
Woohoo!
Yeah, that's why I'm having, I've had surgery and hormones and legal drama and people staring at me like they want to murder me because I'm in Walmart in the wrong aisle. And yeah, I did all of that just because I really wanted a little bit of extra promotion for my webcomic, which, is just blowing up the market now. But, and there are earlier strips there where I am very straightforward about how some of these things feel. And, it's the internet. you know, People will come out of the woodworks to use that against you. And those are the things that tend to linger in the memories, but the experiences have been far outweighed by the positive reactions that I've gotten with it. But I think I put a little bit of that You know, I mean, into anything that I have any hand in the writing of, which with Giant Girl early on, it was just working from the existing script. It took a good chunk of pages before we started varying a little bit from the original script where we had a rhythm going. And I would be like, about this character arc here. And, there would be characters that were fated to die who did not die because of conversations behind the scenes and relationships that took off into different directions because we said, yeah, but. And, that's where a little bit, of that vulnerability will come in even in Giant Girl. There's a lot of vulnerability in Giant Girl. It's not all my vulnerability, and sometimes it's Sabrina's vulnerability. But artistically, I'll put it into because I've got to draw on my own experience as well.
Uh-huh.
Giant Girl's entire origin of how she got her powers is massively vulnerable, and there's a lot of metaphor in there.
Uh-huh.
I write a whole series of werewolf novels where it's like, the werewolves are a metaphor for being trans. And I put a lot of that into there. I put a lot of my vulnerabilities into everything. It's creating anything is very much like just like peeling your skin off and being like, hello.
Yeah. I think it's hard not to put a little bit of your own self in your creative work.
Yeah, if you're not doing that, I think it comes across and the work has no energy, no soul or spark to it. I've read plenty of things that are just, oh, look, there's a machine that is churning out content. I hate that word.
If you can't write a character that you don't have inside of you. So every character has to have some little bit of you in it.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless how good or how bad. And at least with me, with Giant Girl, for me, the fun is that she struggles with self-worth. She has enormous power, but she's not sure what to do with it. And she's lived a life where she's wanted this her whole life. Now she's got it, and it kind of turned into a monkey's paw on her. But she's still trying to enjoy herself and live her life while she avoids responsibility like it's kryptonite. So I think we can all kind of relate.
Hey, queers. If this conversation moves you, don't just listen. Help us keep this platform alive so we can keep amplifying queer voices in art. Salon Naturel and Art in the Raw shine a spotlight on queer artists because their truth leads the way. Follow us on social, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our Patreon for exclusive content. Every follow, share, and membership keeps queer art visible and vibrant. Links are in the show notes. Thank you for standing with us and for keeping our community bold, creative, and unfiltered. Stay raw, y'all. On one of the production notes, I noticed you mentioned how emotional heartstring scenes are a different challenge than action scenes. Which storytelling techniques have been the hardest to master, and what breakthrough moment changed how you approach it?
For me, the heartwarming stuff is easier. Action is what I struggle with because I always in large scale conflicts like that, I'm much more about a singular move that wins the day. What do? Well, I pick up the ocean liner and I set it down sideways in the harbor. Done. That's your solution to keeping enemy ships out of the harbor? Yeah. Worked, right? Gonna go find a bar. Now, you could make that a much more interesting and involved action sequence than that. But my instinct is always to, I have a simple solution. We're done. But let's go find the bar.
It makes sense, but it makes for a less exciting story.
Shorter. It's much shorter.
Yeah.
It's shorter, but in my opinion, those kind of arguments have a tendency to reduce the characters down to like Magic the Gathering cards or stats in a trading card deck, not
That's a good point.
character. The Eagle Hoop scene is a big example of a simple solution to a problem that we re-examined over and over again and is now like a 5 or 6 page sequence.
Because initially it was a 3-page sequence, and I think we expanded it out to about 7 pages. Because we kept re-examining it, because we realized that we rushed the action too much. And we needed to give her more time for her motivation to be conveyed to the reader, so that she wasn't just jumping to a conclusion.
Yeah, there are always picking up the ocean liner and putting it sideways in the harbor. There are always going to be ramifications. There's always going to be that real world stuff that, as the writer, you need to think about. And as the artist, for me, it's a lot of fun to go, okay, cool. Now, how do I visually depict that? And what do we put in the expressions and the body languages that are going to sell the emotion that we want to sell from that?
Is she going to grunt it up onto her shoulder? Is that how she's going to get it over there? Is she just going to get so big that she picks it up like a little toy boat? And if so, where are her feet going to be?
Mm.
These are all things that
What
the
is she
artist
doing to
comes
keep
back
it
to.
from crumbling in her hands? And is it crumbling in her hands? Are chairs falling out of the windows and, chunks of boat collapsing? Or in the case of the Eagle Hoop scene, a mountain?
Details.
Yep.
Details.
It's what gives it the I can never pronounce that word. Verisimilitude?
Yeah, I'm not going to try.
Yeah. I've never heard it pronounced the same way twice either, so.
So since you started the comic in 2012, the indie comics world has kind of changed a lot. What's been the most kind of unexpected challenge as the industry's evolved, and how did you adapt to it?
Finding an audience. Patreon helped a lot to grow our audience, and beyond that, it's hard. There are an awful lot of services out there that you can basically sell your webcomic to, and they'll market it for you. And they have hits. They have success stories. And they carry the marketing for a lot of successful webcomics. But at the same time, you're signing a lot of control over for those things, and we wanted to stay independent. Until now, we just signed a publication deal for the Giants of the Earth book with Laguna Studios. On the one hand, it's great being an independent publisher. On the other hand, I don't have an enormous amount of understanding of Kickstarters, fulfillments, that sort of thing. I'd much rather deal with someone who understands all of that and can take care of it. Because if there's one thing the old man taught me, it was get somebody else to do that. Focus on the work.
So I want to talk a little bit about navigating today's political climate because it's very topical and it's very important. Trans rights today are obviously at the center of our political debate. How has that affected your day-to-day life, both as creators and as people?
It's weird. It feels very similar to how when I came out, it was 2016. So right at the beginning of the current machine and their massive desire to scapegoat us as an entire people to get agendas pushed through, demonize us. And that coming out then, and it's been this wave where it was like, oh my god, things are stabilizing, things seem calm, oh my god, maybe the world won't be the we're back going up that really tall tower on the roller coaster waiting to see what it's going to drop us into.
See, the switch went back to Federation, and we're like, okay, okay. And then the election came, and it switched back over to Terran Empire, and it went much harder this time.
Every morning it's your agonizer, please. But yeah, it's
Let's
going
read the news.
it's going to this, I work in an office. I'm in that office right now. It's got a public restroom, and there's at least a handful of people that do not like seeing me use that. The management of the building is not among them, and so I'm good with that. Like, I'll go into the bathroom and the building manager will be in there, ID, and my biggest problem is now she wants to talk to me and I got to go to the bathroom and I can't do that at the same time. Stuff does not happen. But, then there's some other people that from some of the other offices who will walk on the other side of the hallway when they see me. I live in a very small town in rural Western Pennsylvania deep in red country. And there's a lot of, hatred out there. There's a lot of dirty looks that I get just going to the store. It's something that, in my everyday life, it's something that unfortunately I have to keep on, like, I have to keep my awareness up. I have to keep my spider sense on. I have to keep the alien motion tracker on.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you never know where when it's going to be coming from. Within the industry, it's been, by and large, not the biggest thing in the world. It's mostly like we were talking before about navigating things like when we go out into the world for things like comic conventions. I have to sit there and say, oh, what state is that in? And what laws mitigate how I'm going to function in said state for that
Mm-hmm.
entire convention? I had just signed up for a convention that's in Ohio in September. Ohio is not a friendly state legally. So, you know, I know the venue that it's at. I know they have gender neutral restrooms, but is that even going to be legal by September? The way things are going, it's very hard to tell. It's waking up every morning and checking to see if an executive order made it illegal for me to leave the house, dealing with, people in the industry, dealing with one of the weird things about just conventions is, I've been doing this for decades, and only the last decade of that has been as the fish, which means I still get people who are fans of the other guy's work
Mm-hmm.
who come up to the table. That's always a little
Wow,
awkward.
that's got to be a little awkward, yeah. Sabrina?
I live in Texas, so the legislature is markedly hostile. At this point, we're watching to see if legislature passes that makes it a felony for us to exist. Um, so whenever people tell me who they voted for and they say, "Well, I needed cheaper groceries," I'm like, "Ha ha!
You didn't get that. You
Quite
did.
the cost for the groceries you didn't get." We're in a constant state of uncertainty and debate as to whether or not we should be packing to get out. There, even if they pass the laws, then there are legal challenges. But I mean, we don't want to be caught behind enemy lines and unable to leave,
Yeah, I don't blame you.
which is a novel experience as an American in America in 2025.
Yeah, I never thought we'd be here.
Yeah, this was the
Yeah,
realm of fiction for so long.
I was born in Queens. I'm a native New Yorker, for Christ's sakes. And yet I may be sent to federal prison for felony of existing. So it wears on me. It does. And it does tend to take a bit of a toll on my creativity. But at the same time, because my day is so filled with keeping track of the horrors persist, as do I, instead, uh, with the Giant Girl Adventures novel finished, Dee came back to me and said, "Okay, so here's the thing. I love working with you, and we produce beautiful work. It's very nice. I'm so proud of the work that I've done. But, you know, I'm not getting younger, and the claw can't. It's only got so many more miles in it, and every one of those pages eats up a lot of miles." It's like, okay, I hear you, I understand you. So what would you like to do? And it took us a couple of weeks to spitball ideas around, but I kept kind of pushing the idea snowball forward until I figured out what we wanted to do. And in doing so, in pushing, formalizing that creative process, in starting to craft stories in that milieu, I kind of found an escape in that, because facing the darkness by being creative and constructive and optimistic is its own form of rebellion. And when she came up with this, she said, "I want to do a fantasy based cartoon. You know fantasy, and I know cartoons. Let's do this thing." And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay." And it's been loads of fun. I got the whole thing rolling because we'd thrown enough ideas at each other to come up with something. And once I got it all up and running and rolling as a format, I said, "Okay, I'm going to stop here and I'll wait for you." And then we got together and started working on it together so that it could help both of us as we're, again, you push back the darkness by making art.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great kind of segue into my next question, and that is, has the political climate pushed you to explore themes and stories maybe you wouldn't have touched before November of last year?
I started a Substack and I started telling stories of my life on Substack, and I would not have done that previously. Much more personal than I would care to have out there on the internet. But if uh, if ICE comes and hauls me off tomorrow, the stories will still be out there, even if I'm not, and they'll survive. And yeah, the political climate has absolutely influenced me to do that.
Do you like it if I shared the link to that in the show notes of this episode?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
The more the merrier. I've been told I have an interesting life, and that's why I'm telling my origin stories.
You are a very wonderfully interesting person, Sabrina.
How about you, Dee? How's your writing
For me,
changed?
it reinforced what I've been doing with Finding D. It reinforced it. It made me do what I was doing harder. Like it made me kind of bear down a little bit more and be like, no, you're not gonna tell me that I can't just tell the basic stories of my life because Project 2025 decides anything that positively tells a trans story is porn. And you know, I'm gonna end the strip when I decide to end telling these stories, not when. So yeah, it made me bear down a little harder and push the turd of freedom out.
And you mentioned this earlier, Sabrina, so I want to follow up on it a little bit, given this topic. What role does representation of yourselves and your characters? And I think I know the answer to this, but I want to make sure our listeners are aware of it. What role does representation of yourselves and your characters play for young or questioning trans readers today? What do you hope they see?
We exist. You're not alone.
In every flavor, like we are all just people. We can be boring and we can be kinky and we can be all of those different things, but our existence isn't cause for demonization. We exist, we're allowed to exist, we're allowed to put our stories out there.
We happen.
Yeah.
Nobody jumps out and goes, gosh, you know what would be swell? If I could be trans. Let me throw that one out. That's one of my personal favorites. Let's
Make my
let's
life
see if
so
I
much
can
more complicated.
let's see if I can summarize. That's right, boys and girls. I gave up cis, straight, white privilege so I could become a third class citizen in my own country. Yeah, that's right. I did it all just so that I could get stared at when I go to use the changing room at Ross. And occasionally said, excuse me, these are the ladies' changing rooms. Yeah, I know. Thanks. Yeah, that was our big trans agenda. You betcha. But yeah, it's important for kids to see that we exist, that we can have lives, that we can still be that we can have lives, that we can produce art, that we can tell stories. We can contribute to the greater human story just as much and with just as much validity as everyone else. That they have a tribe out there and we have something to contribute.
One last question on the topic. How can LGB creators and non-LGBT straight creators help amplify trans voices in the arts? Are there examples where allies helped bring your work to a bigger audience? How can they help?
You're doing it now. Exposure. Give our work greater exposure. Promote trans voices. If you want to if you want us to be seen, if you want us to be heard, promote our work. And just like you're doing now, and that goes a long ways because it brings it to a broader audience.
Same deal. I mean, like you said, this show right here, for Laguna Studios coming out and saying, "Hey, D, we want to publish and colorize your stuff and put it to a bigger thing and get it into bookstores and get me into library conferences and stuff like that." Just people who we post our story in the form of, say, Sabrina's blog or my webcomic or Giant Girl or whatever. Share it. The story's out there. Share it to the world. We can only shout from the mountaintop so much. Our voice only carries so far.
Even
And
mine.
it's squeaky and nasal.
Maybe Sabrina's carries a little further.
Not really that far, you'd think, but no.
Let's talk about legacy and future aspirations. Giant Girl Adventures explores things like identity, power, heroism, all through Ronnie's lens. What part of her journey do you most hope resonates, especially with readers searching for their own sense of self?
I'd say that the most important lesson that she learns, that I would hope that readers could connect with and take away from, is that she learns to forgive herself. She learns to accept her mistakes, accept her past, and face them so that she can move into a more positive future. And I'd like to hope that readers would take that away and that it could be positively impactful.
I can't disagree with that. That is the overarching message, especially in the Giants of the Earth arc that we worked on. Ronnie coming to terms with what she's blamed herself for, the weight she's put on her own shoulders, that no matter how big and strong she can get with her power is always still there. She's this Atlas metaphor that has virtually unlimited cosmic power, but is still shackled. So many of us are constantly shackled by our past, by things done to us, things that we have done. Ronnie finds a little bit of a support system, a little bit of judgment that helps her see herself from a different perspective, all for her betterment. It's not about flipping that switch and it's done. In the real world, it's a constant thing. Ronnie goes through an awful lot to get on the other side of saying, I can be better. I can step past all this stuff that's held me down by taking my responsibility for it, stop running away from it, and face it to herself.
All right, so let's close out our discussion. These are 10 questions made famous by James Lipton on Inside the Actor Studio, slightly updated for queer artists. We're going to go back and forth. And Sabrina, I'll start with you. What is your favorite artistic medium or tool?
My favorite artistic medium is graphic novels, comic books. I love the form. I do seem to prefer magazine size format over traditional comics. It's a slightly different size page. But yeah, I love graphic novel storytelling.
D, what artistic trend or cliche do you wish would disappear?
So many. My God.
You might have broke her.
I think so. Sabrina, do you have one?
One artistic trend that I wish would go away.
Oh my God, I broke you both. I have rendered Sabrina speechless.
Hesitate to say something controversial.
Go for it. It's good for the podcast.
One thing that I think I'd like to see go away is the comic system where you have to generate original pages in order to actually make any money off of the book after it's published, and even then only if it's Batman or a marketable character is that going to be so. And artists are still being paid the rates from the 90s to draw modern comics when the cover price keeps going up. The model of modern comics doesn't work, and I'd like to see that change.
I got nothing that I don't.
That's all right.
I gave her all that time to stall, and she still can't narrow
I
it
just don't want
down
to
to
put my
one
foot in
thing.
my mouth either, but
What fuels your creativity the most, Sabrina?
Weed.
the overwhelming need to be better than I was yesterday.
What sound or noise instantly inspires you?
Sound or noise that instantly inspires me. Vince Guaraldi's Peanuts music.
Jump Around by House of Pain.
Goes well with the weed. What
going,
sound
baby.
or noise completely kills your focus?
Flicking, like picking at your fingernails, that snappy sound.
Dog barking in the other room.
What's your favorite word or phrase to include in your work?
What's that one that you always have to edit out? She does a word search for it so that she can. Was it that or then?
Oh God, a bit.
Bit. A bit. That was the one.
I'm working on this series of werewolf novels, and I swear to you, every single paragraph had some use of the words "a bit," sometimes twice in the same sentence. Like, it is my biggest writing crutch, and I had to go in and literally do a find replace, and just it was easier to just erase them all and deal with the occasional double space.
If you could see any queer artist or trans artist, living or dead, honored with a major public monument, who would it be?
I think Susie Izzard deserves a statue because even back in the days of executive travesti, um, Eddie was out there being a bold pioneer. And again, representation matters. Being able to see somebody and go, hey, I understand that. And that means I'm not alone. That's huge. And Eddie was out there forever, alone in the wilderness.
What is one profession or creative field you can never see yourself in?
One profession or anything financial? No.
Yeah, there is nothing creative and financial unless you're cooking the books.
No, I can't. I can't cook, and I can't cook books. No, anything that level of no.
Mm-hmm.
I will shut down. I will just fall on the floor
And I'm
Counting
afraid
our
to ask
entry.
Sabrina this next question. If your art could take on a life of its own, what form would it take?
A cadre of deeply flawed superheroes and heroines and villains. A rather large cadre because I've got a lot of them in my head. So they all have their own different ways to clamor for attention.
And this one will go to both of you for sure. I'll start with D. 100 years from now, what do you hope your art says about you to those who find it in the future?
I was here. I did something worth remembering in 100 years, and I'm not less than a footnote.
I would hope for the same. Honestly, I would like to be remembered for my work. And ideally, you want to be remembered for your work, and also I was fabulous. So I want to be remembered for that too. I had my span of my glory years.
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty good, so I want to make sure those get remembered too. I may do a photo book.
Nice.
Take pictures of yourself when you're young and pretty.
Yep. Well, I'm so grateful that the two of you agreed to join me for this. It was a very insightful, very wonderful conversation, and I can't wait to see where Giant Girl goes next.
And Adventures in Dungeoneering is going to be our new project. So we'll keep you up to date on that. Like I said, we've begun work on it, and we're both very excited as it's moving forward.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Be a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.